Hey. Hey guys, this is Dr. Shantella Sherman from the Acumen group, and I am super duper excited today. Instead of doing the popular eugenics in television and film little roundup, instead I'm going to do something called Eugenically Speaking. We're still going to talk a little bit about TV and film, but a specific show. And I am on with the lovely Dr. Sophia Sparks, who is also an Acumen editor. And she is the resident scientist, and I mean bona fide, certified, stamped, and approved. Dr. Sparks is the person that Acumen uses for all of the amazing things that come up that are medical and scientific and confusing to most of us. And then she breaks it down to me in this ear, and then I try and do a translation and send it out. And so when you read things in Acumen where we're trying to decipher scientific and medical information, a lot of times it's coming through the lovely Dr. Sparks here. So thank you for joining me, Dr. Sparks. How are you?
I am well. Thank you for having me.
Good. Well, today, guys, what we're going to talk about is a new Netflix series called The One. All right. And in similar fashion as we would have things like Orphan Black, this particular Netflix series is another BBCer. It's very British in its delivery, and it turns you around a lot of corners, and it dips and dives a whole bunch of times, but it's extremely interesting. And so here's the background information on this. Basically, there's a belief that the one person that you are genetically made for, the perfect mate, is out there, but the only way to find them is through DNA testing. Right now, some of you will be like, oh my God, that's amazing. That sounds wonderful. All right. There's always a drawback to this type of thing. But instead of this show being like, again, the Orphan Black type of series where it's heavy in the science of things and they're talking about cloning in Orphan Black, instead in this particular series, I think the show developers, and one of the developers is from the television show Misfits. So if you remember, it's kind of all around the bend, but you love it because it kind of hits home and it makes you think about the reality that people in Misfits could get struck by lightning and develop supernatural or these weird powers and all of that. The belief is right now that we are extra lonely and that we are in need of mates more than ever. And we're seeking love and attention and the perfect one. And so the belief that that one person is out there goes all the way back to Grimm's fairy tales when you're looking for the prince to scale the wall. And it's that one kiss or that one person with the slipper that fits. And so I think as little kids, we're all kind of drawn into the concept that we, for whatever reason, are looking for that one perfect mate. And so this show is a little weird. So first, Dr. Sparks and I are going to kind of break down the show and what we like about it, what we didn't like about it. But then we're also going to get into the science of it, because the reality is, even though the show may sound a bit far-fetched, there are a number of actual companies that are doing DNA matching. So they're DNA matchmakers. And so the show deals with a lot of problems that could come along with that. Please be aware there are spoilers in this because we're not going not tell it. Give you a heads up. We're going to break some of this stuff down. So it's still a great show. So I would say watch it one way or the other, but we're going to give you a little bit of a heads up. So I'll tell you right now, and I may even holler out spoilers so you know to turn the volume down and watch it later. You may want to watch this broadcast after you've actually seen the show. But essentially, again, there's this scientist, Rebecca Webb, who determines that she can find a way of genetically pairing people so that you find that perfect match. And because it's genetically and DNA based, the person that you find is the person that you're latched onto and that you'll never leave each other. You'll have a perfect relationship. It'll be happily ever after. So first off, Sophia, what did you think of the show? As a scientist, where did you fall in this?
I actually had to turn off my scientific mind to watch the show.
Okay.
I had to look at it from pure entertainment. Because I was just like, really? I mean, because it dealt with humans on the basic animalistic level ever. And it's like, we are so more complex than this. And it was just like, no, okay, just let's look at it for just pure entertainment only. So that is how I had to approach it probably after the first 10 minutes. I was like, this is not how it's going to go. This is not going to work at all. But I did like, one thing I did like was Rebecca. I did find her character quite interesting. That she was weird, devious, but that whole dynamic of, can a woman successfully run a multi-million-dollar company and do it well? That is the aspect that I found interesting about her character. Not what she did, because she's crazy.
Okay.
She was crazy.
And she had a global reach, and she had an absolutely global reach with these DNA markers that she was looking at, because your match could be where you are, but your match could be anyone who is in that database.
Right.
And so based on that, you could be paired up with someone who is in another country, on the other side of the globe, and in some instances could be of a different ethnic group, or the same gender as you are.
Right.
So again, we kind of hashed some of this out ahead of time, Sophia. So I was kind of like, if it's based on pheromones, then I'm thinking it will automatically make you pair up with the opposite sex, as opposed, or opposite gender, as opposed to same gender. So again, scientifically, I was like, I don't know if this would work quite like this. So yeah, that kind of made me think, I don't know if this is quite scientific, and it's a bit more for entertainment value.
Yes. I mean, of course, pheromones, like when you have an attraction for the same sex and it's based off of pheromones, is not so much of a sexual interaction or draw that you have for somebody. You're more so in real terms, okay, real life. You'll say, you know what? I don't know, like for some reason, I just feel really connected to you. Okay. Usually that's what you say, but that is the basic animalistic, like, you know what? There's something in our DNA that says, hey, we're closely aligned. Therefore, you're just more so be like, you know what? You get me. People, that's where that phrase usually comes from. It's like, you know what? It's just like, you get me. And it's like, yes. Okay. So that's where that show was trying to take that whole where you can find a DNA match and your match can be of the same gender. They were trying to extrapolate that from that real life situation. So it's not so much as a sexual component to it.
Okay. So here's the thing. And the real science behind this, because some of this, again, Acumen, we research, darling. So you're not just going to throw this up and we go, I like this character. It's like, wait a minute, let's back this up a little bit. So the science behind this in real life was actually based on something called the sweaty t-shirt study.
Yes.
And it was based on scientists allowing these men, a group of men, to wear the same funky t-shirt.
Yes.
They all wore, each one of them wore the same shirt for 3 or 4 days or an extended period of time, so that their sweat and their hormones and their pheromones are all in the concentrated in the sweaty t-shirt. And then they had a group of women to come in, and each one smelled a different t-shirts to determine where their sexual attraction was within that group of men. Right. So, and then basically what they said was the men whose pheromones were the farthest away from the women's were the ones that they would be most compatible with, because it's not some opposites attract. That's the part of it. But also
not actually.
So it's
not dealing with humans.
Wow. Okay.
So when you usually find a mate, that whole law of opposites does not work.
Wow. Okay.
And there's numerous studies that actually support this, and they show that you most align with someone that you have more alike. So like attracts like when it comes to matching with within the human, but in every place else, it's the laws of opposites is the actual rule.
And I think that that's part of what slips it up, because I think, again, scientists go from plants and animals to trying to pull that science into people. And humans have a completely different set of rules and regulations that we go by.
Exactly.
So again, another part of that kind of threw me. You get the information that, okay, the pheromones, this person's pheromones have got me, climbing the walls. I think I really want to be with this person. But the reality was, in the animal kingdom, and I think they did the study originally on ants.
Yes.
What the animals are looking for is someone who can reproduce their genetic line and be successful with it. So it's strictly about reproduction, as opposed to I like anything about them
Right.
other than the fact that they are functional and that they're able to reproduce my line successfully. That's it. That is what the attraction is. The attraction has nothing to do with beauty, height, size, weight, color, ethnicity, race. And so environment doesn't play into this at all. So again, the eugenics researcher in me immediately goes, this sounds like you're again trying to do the old American Breeders Society or the American Breeders Association, where you're literally trying to take the science of livestock and apply it to humans, which won't work. Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
So and the thing about okay, spoilers. Okay, I'm gonna give you a heads up. Rebecca Webb was problematic for me just because, I really don't like the way they set this up a lot of times with BBC programming, especially where they get these women who are, it's almost like someone pulled them out of a box and just kind of wound up the little key in their backs. And then they just start, I couldn't find the humanity in her in a real concrete way. It was just like, she's driving me crazy because I'm looking for her to slip up and cry. I'm looking for her to laugh at some point. And I couldn't get any of that. So I just kept saying, all right, I need to get on to this other couple. All right. So there are 3 simultaneous stories that are functioning within the one script. And so the thing that the couple that stood out for me, or the storyline that stood out for me, was the married couple. Okay. So Mark and Hannah, they've been married for a while. They're a lovely couple. They're beautiful. You like them from the start. All right. They get along. Everything's amazing with them. But there's a constant barrage of information about find the one. So you see you see Hannah going through the streets, coming home, going to work, and these signs are flashing everywhere. The one. And it puts in her mind the idea that perhaps her husband is not the one for her, or perhaps she is not the best person for her husband. And once that seed is planted, she literally cannot cope. All right. And so she starts asking her husband, okay, do we want to find out, would you ever do this? And he's going, no, I love you. And this is where I want to be. And we're great. So yes, spoilers. All right. She decides to use the DNA to determine who the match would be, not for herself, but who the perfect match would have been for her husband. And then once she finds out who the person is, she decides to meet them. And this is a swiping type of situation where you get a match on your phone. The DNA is sent in. It's a hair sample. The results are sent back through your telephone. So she sends the results in as if they were hers, but they're actually her husband's. And then she swipes and she sees the young lady that her husband is paired up with. And instead of leaving it at that, she decides to meet the woman. And so there's a whole scenario of just bad decisions that take place beyond that, that complicate their marriage and friendships and all types of things. So the question that I started posing to people was, if you were already in a relationship with someone, would you take the risk of trying to do a DNA sample to determine if the person you're with is really the person you should be with, or if you're right for the person that you're with? Would you take that risk? Is it logical? And most of you were like, heck no. And then I had a few of you who I don't have to name and I won't name, that are not perhaps in good relationships right now, who were like, if the ability, was available at this moment, you would find the right person and like kick the person you were with down the down the hill or something. So we're not promoting that by any stretch, but right. Okay. But But do you?
They play on this. They
Yes.
play on the fact of, the possibility of what if. They play on the what if, and if you're in a bad relationship, because there's always that idea that everybody talks about in the dating and in the married realm of I settled. So they're playing on that. Oh, well, you settled, but guess what? You don't have to settle much longer because you could do this test and you can find the one.
Right.
Really? I mean, come on. I mean, think about this. Like, okay, so you're attracted to this person. You feel an attraction for this person as soon as you meet them. Okay, after you're intimate with them, what now?
Okay.
Because that's all that test is telling you is just, y'all probably in the sack, y'all probably be A-okay.
You're sexually compatible, but that's about it.
So you can't spend your whole entire day having sex. I mean, you still got to go to work. You still got to sit free. I mean, there's other things you have to be able to do throughout the day, unless you know that is your profession. Hey, all power to you. But I'm just saying, you can't. You have to do other things. So it's like, so when those other factors come in, now what? Are you really still going to be attracted to that person? Like, one of the characters that I find especially exciting on the show is the cop. I forgot her name. Do you recall her name?
Not right off. Female cop. Yeah, she seemed like she was in her right mind for about that long.
I mean, but you have
to look up.
She takes the DNA test, and her one is a woman. Okay, but this woman is contrary to every fiber in her being. This woman is a cop. She doesn't lie. She doesn't cheat. She doesn't steal. The person she's matched with does all of the above. And it's like, I'm sorry, you're not going to stay with this person. You're not going to be happy with this person because every time they say something, your alarm bells are going to go off. And like, I wonder, is she lying? Is she cheating? Is she stealing? Like, so it's like, in the snack, we might be okay. But as soon as that's finished, everything else within me is going to be like, no, this is not right. Run.
Well, and then I think you make the point. The cop, it turns out the cop's relationship is with a woman named Sophia. All right, but so the thing is, this character lies about, it's not little minor types of things, which would be bad enough because that means that she has a habitual, issue with not telling the truth. But they're major things that she's lying about. Her relatives, who she is, her background. All of these things are just completely not true. But the cop believes because this is genetically supposed to be my one, no matter what this person does, I'm prepared to overlook it. And so we talked again about the fact that when you have folks who overlook the truth or they're being fed certain information, they will automatically, take those shortcuts or they'll automatically believe the hype. So it's like a placebo effect where no matter what this person does, I believe it's wonderful and it's great just because I've been told that this is the person I'm supposed to be with.
Right. So you would automatically accept and deal with things that you normally would not accept or deal with. So now you're putting yourself in a situation to where if you felt an attraction for someone else outside of sex, like many people have their work wives, work husbands, they have a relationship outside of sex, and that person is drawing on those other aspects that make you human. So now when she finds somebody and they start drawing on that, is she going to leave Sophia? I mean, because if you think about it, animalistically, especially with all the technology we have in this world, if it's a sexual problem, 9 times out of 10, you can fix that.
Right.
You have sex. I mean, you have sex therapists. I mean, you got everything. You have all these things at your disposal where the sex can be fixed.
Right. Well,
but
true.
The other components within it can't be fixed. I can fix the sex. I can't fix everything else.
Right. And the officer's name is Kate. And so again, it's just, you start to understand that again, you talked about the fact that the young woman who froze to death of hypothermia in a in a freezer, a walk-in freezer that was unplugged.
Yes.
And so you talked about the fact that your mind can trigger all types of things that are bodily and emotional and mental when it's just not what it is. And it's like your mind is a very, very, very powerful,
Power.
it's a weapon sometimes. Other times it's a tool.
Yes.
And so with this, you saw, I think, the dangers of being fed information and then being led to believe this is the person for you and you can't live without them. And so it's no telling who your match is going to be. So if your match turns out to be a serial killer, you say, but that's the one for me. So it's okay.
I
And you make
don't,
allowances.
I don't think they would actually do that. Because think about it. Okay, what if I grew up and I was a racist and my match happened to be someone of the ethnicity that I was taught to hate? What you've been bred and what you've been taught, how are you going to just throw that aside and be like, well, DNA say this is the person for me, so therefore now I'm just going to accept it and I'm going to love this person? That's not going to happen.
Okay, but so right, Sophia, we tried to break this down. We're gonna go a little deep for just a second. All right, so let's try this.
Okay, let's go deep.
So again, when we do eugenics and we break down the difference between Mendelian and Lamarckian, we talk about the fact that if you take a person out of their environment, which may be racist and hateful, and you pull them into another environment, I mean, the number of times I've heard someone say that it's a interracial couple, and they'll say, well, okay, my husband or my wife's family still hate this particular group of people, but I'm no longer in that environment, and I now see that they're wrong, and so I've literally just kind of come over to this side. And so what you'll find sometimes is that that person who married outside of their family and thereby outside of that hatred or that racism or whatever else is now, for the most part, a part of a new tribe. All right. They're now a part of a group of folks who will, embrace them in all of this for the most part, because even that won't be, all lovely and fluffy, but they tend to take on either, this new culture almost implicitly sometimes. And so it's almost a trade-off. So do they still somewhere in their hearts or minds have some of those racist attitudes? Don't know. I would like to think not. At the same time, like I said, it takes that relationship to be to kind of go through some things. And so I've also seen folks who they were fine when they were together, and when the marriage broke apart and they were in a divorce process, the N word started flying around and cracker started being a part of people's language, and it was like, you just like your people and da da da. So, I don't know if that's just the hurt that kind of welcomes in the language of hatred, or if that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's genetic. I think sometimes this is just an environmental type of thing, and then again, your mind and your emotions, they tend to rule over anything else. All right, so there are plenty of people. There's a great documentary, and I have to think of, this is what happens when you talk off the cuff. There is a great documentary that talks about Madam in Mississippi. And she talks about the fact this is one of the most famous women on the planet. Okay. And she's known for a whorehouse. She's a madam, and she started plying trade in a particular house. And she would go around the world and get girls who were quote unquote exotic. But she's right there in Natchez, Mississippi. Okay. So, right. Okay. So I just make that mean everything it is supposed to mean. All right. So she starts plying trade 1940s, 50s, 60s. So in the middle of the civil rights movement, this is a Black woman that runs a brothel in the middle of Natchez, Mississippi. And her rule is only white men can come in. But the women that are in that house are of all these different ethnicities. Okay. And so one of the things she makes a point, every Klansman knew how to get to that back door. Her thing was, you got to go through my back door. But every person, every Klansman, and she was running trade to a point where she had intel and she had insight from the Mississippi governors and from the police officers, the chiefs of police, the city council people, everybody was in her brothel. Okay. And everyone was with these women of all hues, ethnicities, and from around the world that, again, she was flying in. Okay. But it didn't stop them, not nan time, from going out and putting on their Klan's robes and burning their crosses and still doing whatever it was that they were trying to do to halt integration and all of these other things. So I think, again, it's the duplicitous of it. You know, I always say racism is psychotic in and of itself. It's like, okay, the one thing you say you hate is the one thing that you're just enveloped by.
Right.
The average Black person really isn't that concerned, I don't think, with what white people are doing. The average Chinese person isn't concerned about what white people are doing. The average, and so it's like literally no one's trying to take anything from you. And so, but it's like you can't necessarily break apart from that. And at the same time, as soon as you're actually around these other groups of people, that hatred is like, why am I hating? Why am I so engrossed in what these people are doing when they're just like the folks down the street? They're just like my neighbors. They're like my kinsmen. They're like everyone else. So what is all of this other stuff going on? So I think, again, when we start talking genetics and you start saying with the DNA sample, I'm going to find your perfect and only one. So that was another question that came up. Could there only be one match? Is it possible that you would have more than one? And so if you're looking at the animal kingdom, you know, they're talking about ants. It was like, yeah, ants aren't mating with one other ant. So it's silliness. So that was the other thing, Sophia. Is it possible to have just that one person that you're supposed to be with? Or is it possible over the course of time that your likes, your taste, your whatever, and even your DNA? Someone told me the DNA changes every 7 years or so. Is that true? It shifts. No shifting. Okay. All right. Help me. And again, guys, this is what happens when you go online sometimes. Everything, people say all kinds of stuff. The DNA, it like your body shifts itself. It scrubs out its own coding.
No, the only thing that happens is sometimes you will have, when you have cell division, your cells, when they divide, you might have a mismatch. And that particular cell will correct itself, but your DNA itself, your DNA is your DNA. Whatever DNA you got, that's the DNA. Okay. What you going with, that's what you're going to die with.
All right, so here we go. I'm going to pull this over. So years ago when we went through Prohibition, the real reason for the Prohibition in the first place, and even the laws about cocaine and all of this, were because it was believed, eugenically speaking, that they would alter your DNA. And so it wasn't just that if you were an alcoholic, that you would end up causing your children not to be born alcohol dependent or have the shakes or anything like that, but that you were actually triggering something in their DNA to create alcoholism as a trait that would be passed on to them, and then for 10 or so successive generations. All right. So the belief was that we have to keep people from drinking because it's destroying their DNA. And that's literally a part of the legislation for Prohibition.
Oh, yeah, no.
And I don't know that. I mean, again, you're talking about 1914 and moving forward to 1920 when they actually said, okay, that's it. And we're going to stop selling alcohol. So I don't know that you could possibly make that connection at a time when we weren't even taking blood samples.
Right. It's like, no. I mean, you have weird one-offs where you have like some females where their reproductive organs will have one set of DNA and the rest of them will have a separate DNA. So the way that we found this out is whenever that particular woman would birth a child, and they would take, a blood sample from her brachial artery, the crease right in your elbow. Okay. When they take it from that area, it shows one set of DNA, and when they take a sample from the child, it shows a separate DNA, and it shows that this is not your mother. And they're like, wow, no. So there's been studying documentaries, especially like this one woman, she had like 6 children, and they kept questioning her. And so the next time she went in to give birth, they actually tested the child and her right then and there. And they were like, wait a second. And so they went in internally and actually tested her organs, and her organs and the child's DNA then matched.
And matched. How common is that?
Not common.
Okay.
That is okay. So rare. It is not common at all.
Okay.
So like that's the only thing where I can see like split DNA, but that's just
okay. I'm getting ready because I'm gonna jump the fence for a second just because you brought that up. All right. Okay. I'm not really going to deal with the royal family. I'm not even bothering with that. But because something came up specifically related to, I got a lot of weird emails and text messages about the possibility of quote unquote throwback baby. Meaning, even if you, okay. So Sophia, again, I understand basic biology. And so I understand how chromosomes can crisscross and how they match up. So even in a family where it's the same parents, even if they're technically about the same shade or hue, that those children will still have perhaps a variety of hues within the frame of that one household. All right. Yeah. No one cheated. No one stepped out. But the kids may be lighter and or darker in many instances than the two original parents. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the fear is that if you have a child that visually looks to be a white baby, that eventually, if that child doesn't protect its own DNA, that they may end up marrying someone who's also white. But then when that person has a baby, the baby will throw back. It'll be a throwback genetically, and it'll end up coming out brown. Okay. So again, there's been a lot of fear mongering at the turn of the century and up through about the 1930s about throwback babies. And so that's what came up with this the royal family and Meghan Markle and being afraid of what the color or complexion of the child would be. Meghan Markle, when you look at her visually, sometimes if the couple are standing next to each other, I'd say if I weren't paying attention and she colored her hair blonde, I wouldn't know which one was the black one and which one was supposed to be the white one. Okay. Gotcha. Their skin tones aren't that far off from each other. And you know, plenty of white people in the South, but other places where there's a lot of sun, a lot of Australians whose skin tone is rather brown. All right. Mm-hmm. It's certainly not pale. So you wouldn't be able to tell. But the idea that the child could potentially look like Meghan's mother was of deep concern. And so genetically, can you explain how that works? Is it possible to have a quote unquote throwback baby, or is it just the luck of the draw with your DNA?
You can have a throwback baby, but it's because the luck of the draw of your DNA. Okay. So your DNA, you have all of your ancestors' information. So you have all this information that could potentially come out in each child that is born. You do not know how the DNA is going to splice and actually come together between you and your spouse or your sperm donor, whatever the case may be. You don't know how it's going to splice, come together, and what's going to be dominant. You don't know which of the alleles or which piece of information that the body's going to say, yes, we're going to express this one.
Okay.
So you have all this genetic information within you that can be pulled out and physically expressed. You don't know how it's going to do that. Like, for instance, my mother is very light. She used to be lighter, but she's taking medication, which has made her look like she has like a bad orange tan. Yes. I mean, my mother was so light that I can recall going to school and the children at school asked me, oh, your white nanny is coming to get you. That's not my white nanny. That's my mother. Because, because our skin complexions are totally different. So my mother can actually pass for white.
Right.
And all the students and the teachers always think that my mother was white. My dad is almost blue black. My dad is very dark. Okay. So and my brother goes more towards my mother's skin complexion. I'm in the middle. Well, my dad's really dark, so I'm a little bit closer over, but
right.
You don't know. you have absolutely no clue, like what piece of information that particular child's going to be like, you know what, today we're going to look like your great, 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 great grandmother.
Right.
And, you know, that's what we're going to go with. I mean, because you always hear the older generations, when they look at a child, they'd be like, oh, she has great, great grandmother's nose and great, 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 great grandfather's father's eyes. And she has so-and-so's this, because they can see, because they have those pictures and that information, they're like, oh, your genetics may say this, but physically it is expressed based off of these different individuals that were in our lineage. And we can tell you, oh, this particular body part comes from this particular family member within our line. We can't do that because, you know, the information gap, but that's all it is. So that's the reason why you end up having throwback babies. And the thing is that even so, we're going to stay with Meghan Markle, Prince, they have all these children. If their children, once their children have children, can their children still have throwback babies? Yes.
It is. Okay. So again, so eugenically, right. So that's why I said eugenically speaking, because you didn't have the DNA test, no one was taking blood samples. It was strictly about the visual. And so some of the laws that we looked at socially were predicated upon the fact that, for instance, one of the things about sundown towns, it came about because you had a number of visually white-looking women who were married to white men who gave birth to babies, and the babies were brown. Now that's could have been the father who had his DNA as well. But the law became, it had to have been some black person. You know, I've seen newspaper articles where it's like one woman went to court and said it must have been the Negro that walked past the window at the time of conception, like he was peeping into the window when I was having sex with my husband. And so the husband attests on, you know, under oath, you know, my wife was a virgin when I met her, this, and this. There are no Negroes in the neighborhood. So no one could have gotten to her. So it had to have been this black man walking past the window. How absurd that is, absolutely. But when you see it written down in law that when sundown comes, if you live in this town, you need to be off the streets. And then in some instances, when sundown comes, you don't need to be in this county. All right. These laws were, again, predicated upon all of a sudden these babies coming out, and it's like, where'd this little brown baby come from? And it's always the woman who, again, the fault lies with her. And so you end up having orphanages and, you know, babies who are thrown away based on the fact that it was believed the woman had been raped or somehow violated, and the household and the sanctity of their marriage was destroyed. All right. But it was basic science. It was basic science and DNA that they really didn't understand at that point. So it's laughable, but it's tragic at the same time.
That is tragic.
It's pretty ridiculous. Okay. So now we're gonna jump back across this fence. Now that we got Meghan and the whole throwback situation taken care. Now, 3 companies that I have been able to find for Pheromore, DNA Romance, Gene Partners, and Instant Chemistry. All right.
Yes.
Instant Chemistry and DNA Romance both are out of Canada. So I'm hoping at some point I can pass this on to Christy P, who's my Coronation Street queen, who joins me for Talks on Carla and Peter, and just kind of figure out what's going on in Canada, where these 2 companies are making massive amounts of money. And I think the starting fee is something like $250 for the DNA sampling and all of this, and then to have your DNA pulled into a match space into the data bank. But then they also I don't know if this will help, Sophia, but they also do in addition to the chemistry test, which is the DNA, a personality test, a physical attraction test, and then a common interest test.
Exactly.
So now if you pull those 4 together, okay. Those 4.
Because like attracts likes when you're dealing with human mating.
Okay.
Personality, because out of the bed, can I stand you? You know, I mean, we have to do basics. I mean, basic on the simplest thing. I mean, you have things where you have couples who are in love, but the mere fact of raising a child will cause a great divide within their actual relationship. So, do you have the same thought process on
Mm.
a child? What if your perfect match doesn't want to have kids at all and you want to have 10? What do you do in those instances?
Right.
And waiting for these databases to actually populate with enough people to where you might get a match. I mean, going back to the show with Rebecca, her counterpart, then it's like from the time they launched to the time Rebecca just went off the deep end, years have now passed, and his match just came into the system. And it's like, well, how long are you willing to wait? Are you willing to stop the normal means of actually meeting someone to actually wait to see if your perfect match will eventually put their information into this database? I mean, and then sometimes I think, why are we trying to take a shortcut? Are people afraid of the work? Because even if you have your perfect match, you still have to put in the work to actually grow and maintain that relationship. Because if you don't do it, then you're just going to be in this whole situation all over again.
But this is the thing. If someone, again, and I think, again, this was the placebo thing that we talked about. I think based on the fact that you're told science, whenever someone says science said it, it's like it's proven. And I always say the reason why you have a hypothesis and you have theories and then you're trying to prove them is so that you're constantly trying to approve it again. You're trying to keep going through this to say, okay, was something fallible the first time we did this? Is it still true? Is it still true now? Is it still true under these circumstances? And so you start to understand you can't bank on science. You absolutely cannot. I mean, there's certain things I think even now they'll say, well, we aren't really sure scientifically how this happened. There's no explanation for it. All right. And I do believe, that there's some things that science simply cannot explain. Every time you think you have it, you don't. And so when you get to a point where you're other people are talking about manipulating your genetic code to take out certain sequences that they think could be problematic for you later on. So, we're talking about folks who are saying there's a history, for instance, of breast cancer within certain families, and they're trying to find the markers, and they say we've isolated the genetic code for what would be breast cancer, and so we're going to see if we can extrapolate that out of your DNA sequences so that by the time you start to have kids, it won't be there. I know this, and you know this, Sophia. As soon as you start manipulating one part of this long, extremely long chain, and you can tell me exactly how long, but I know it's beyond counting at this point, really. That what you're doing is tripping something else up.
You are, because you're trying to force a mutation.
Okay.
And whether or not you're going to delete, so you're going to do a deletion. So you're going to delete this certain part, insert another part to compensate for what you just took out, and hope that everything's going to go okay. But that's not how our body works. Our body is not. They keep trying to simplify our bodies, which is not the case. I mean, our bodies are so complex. We're still learning so much about the human body. I mean, because the human body is made for self-survival. That's why, if people are ever, easy example, if you are ever in a situation to where you're experiencing hypothermia, first thing your body is going to do is cut off blood flow to your lower extremities, because it's like, look, I'm trying to survive. I don't care what you're trying to do, but I'm trying to live. So I'm going to cut off the non-functional parts and just circulate blood and everything else to these organs, these parts, because I know this is what I need to survive. And it's like, okay, the body is going to do what it needs to do to survive. So when you start altering things and you start altering our DNA, it's like you're going to sit up here and start a cascade of events, and you don't know what those repercussions are going to be.
True. And so what I keep telling folks, if you need a pop culture version of this that deals with animals, not people, but the science is exact, find Jurassic Park. I love watching it just so I can watch the scientists say, we've taken this out and we've done this and we've added. When I listen to the scientists say, there was a gap in what we took out. So we put in amphibian DNA, and it was like, but you have frogs that change gender in order to keep the population going. So you can't have a whole breeding ground and it's only females. Why? Because some of them have now turned themselves male and they're able to reproduce this way in the wild. You can't control birthing processes. And so I think, again, eugenically speaking, whenever I do this, it's like, yeah, whether you're trying to push, sterilizations or different types of drugs that will cause a sterilization, or you're trying to cut off or promote births in certain areas, it just does not work. It's like when God turns the faucet off, it's off. When he turns it on, it's on. Okay. So you can't decide that you're going to manipulate this. I think maybe back in 2015, I was in London and they were having this long discussion on a morning television program. And the women were talking about, since they were all under NHS, how fertility in vitro costs one thing in one area and it costs another amount in another area out of pocket and da da da. And I kept thinking, okay, I just need to call in. I really want to call in because I'm not understanding this. Why are so many women here unable to get pregnant by natural means? And then the announcer says, currently only about 20 to 25% of the native born British women are able to get pregnant by natural means. And I said, that is what you need to be concerned with. Something else is going on. So I kept saying, well, is it the women or is it the men? Because once again, the issue always socially falls on the women.
Right. And you have men with so many reproductive problems, and a lot of it comes from what you eat. Okay. Men, if you're listening, if you eat anything with soy byproducts, whatever, soy is found is the filler in most things that we eat here in the States. Soy decreases your sperm production. So your little soldiers will go from the millions to the thousands and just keep going down, all because of soy. And the reason why is soy can mimic estrogen. Yes, men do have a small amount of estrogen, but when you start shifting those levels, men have more testosterone than estrogen in their body. But when that level starts to disappear and change, you're telling the body, hey,
I don't need that
because I have all this estrogen. So then you're messing with things. And then that's one of the reasons why there was that big issue with women and their birth control pills. How are you disposing of your birth control pills? Are you throwing it in the landfills? Are you flushing it down the toilet? Because what transpired is that the women, a lot of people were flushing it down the toilet, or it was going in landfills and making its way into different waterways. Well, what we saw was it was changing the genders of fish. It was causing fish to go from male to female.
Jeez. Okay.
Then the issue comes is, are the water treatment plants here in the States, is the engineering set up so when the water is clean and filtered and cleaned up and prior to actually coming out of your tap, can we take out those compounds? Because if not, now it's dissolvable. You can't see it. You can't taste it. And now you're just drinking it. So now you're dosing all these men with all this estrogen. And now you're like, well, my woman can't get pregnant. No, your woman's fine because her body's like, estrogen, yes, I like that. That is who I am. Your body's like, estrogen, that's too much. We only like this amount. You gave me 4 times the level, whatever the case may be. And your body's like, we're going to stop all of this, or we're going to decrease all of this production. So there's all these environmental factors that are coming into play. And that's another thing that show does not account for, the one. So you have this mental aspect, you have a physical aspect, you have a spiritual aspect. What if you found an atheist and they're like, I believe in God, and they're like, okay, I don't know how I'm going to deal with this. I've only met one couple where their religious views were so vastly different and they were able to make it work. But, when you talk to them, they said it took them years of dating and figure out how they were going to work on this and what compromise they came up with before they even got married and was able to come up with a system that worked. But if this is your one and they come up to you and you already have this thing that is just like, no, this is a no-go for me in any other dating scene, do you give them a pass just because they're the one?
Well, and Sophia, you bring up a great point too. Spirituality, religion doesn't factor in to the show, except for the man with the placard that just keeps saying, this is the road to hell. This is the road to hell. But it's like, okay, you're literally looking at this going, for folks who are religiously sound, I don't care what your faith is, you don't believe in science and the DNA is going to dictate who you're with.
Yeah.
You're going with ritual, and you're going with, whatever your family and community does, whether it's an arranged type of situation, or what happens if you're supposed to be with someone who's from within your community and your faith, and all of a sudden they're telling you, okay, but your one is actually on the other side of the globe, or it's completely the opposite of what you do spiritually. It was like, this doesn't sound like it would be happy-go-lucky. So I kept looking for the show to try and deal with some of that nuance. And again, there's a season 2, which, there are 9 episodes, I believe, to the first season. And so thank you. I think you made it through 5 or 6 at this point. I did the entire 9 because I just thought, perhaps they'll close it out and that'll be the end of it. But then I realized when they get to the end of it, spoilers. All right. When they get to the end of it, the Black couple, Mark and Hannah, they've gone through an entire transition, within their household, and finding this person who was supposed to be the one for one of them. I'm not going to give you a full spoiler or whatever, but they have to try and cope with the fact that Hannah is pregnant at the end of the first season. So how does that impact all of the rest of the stuff that they've just gone through, and what will it mean for their relationship, and then these outside relationships that are forming based upon DNA? Right.
And then speaking of Hannah, you gotta think about Mark. So Mark, he meets up with his one and he has an affair. Sorry, spoiler alert. He has an affair.
First. Okay. Right.
His one. But now he and both his one are also will continually say, I'm not a cheater, I'm not this, I'm not that. But yet they still participate in different actions.
Still engaging with one another.
Yes, I'm like, how much spoiling am I going to give? They participate in actions.
Right.
I'm not going to tell you if the actions are just, minor actions, big actions. They participate in actions.
Right.
Okay. And these actions, you're like, okay, how can you still make the claim that I'm not this type of person and this is what you do? So if this is the type of person you are, you're in a relationship, you're doing this with your one. So what if, say, Mark in season 2, Mark divorces Hannah. He gets with his one. If I'm the one, I'm gonna be like, well, I know what you were doing with the person you told me you loved, who was pregnant with your baby with me. So does that mean you're gonna do the same thing to me? I don't know.
Right.
So now you're creating a whole new set of doubts. And now you have another mind game that's going to start creeping up once you're with your one. I mean, because your mind is going, just every day, like you have different individuals who love their mate, they love whomever, but yet when they're out of their sight, they always question, they always wonder the what if, are they doing this? Are they here? Are they there? He walked past this person. Does he think that person? Does she think that person looks better than me? I mean, and it's like your mind will always go to that what if. I mean, it's like watching porn. They always say the reason why the bad thing about porn is it's the mental picture it puts in your mind.
Right.
And always seeing the one, and it's plastered everywhere in this show, on everything. And it's like, so is that having the same type of effect?
Well, see,
When you're looking, you're just like,
it's just replaying, right? And so this is the thing. This, what you're saying, put me in the mind. Also, it's right on point. It follows this TV series, Dr. Foster, which was completely different. There's no DNA cut up in this, but basically, what happens? This woman gets a scarf from her husband, leaving out the door one day, and when she gets to work, she realizes that there's a long blonde hair on it. Now, if you say, okay, well, somebody said, well, maybe he brushed up against someone, he gave someone a hug, whatever. It could have been anything innocent, but her mind is so analytical that she just keeps on investigating and digging until she figures out that yes, he is in fact having an affair, and then it becomes, who is he having the affair with? So she's literally looking at every person with blonde hair anywhere around.
Like, is it you? Is it you? It's you.
To figure out, and it's an amazing show, but for me, it was literally, it's like when people do the show Cheaters, the person is already cheating.
Yes.
And it's like, how much do you need a ton of bricks to fall on your head? You need Maury to say, you are lying. You are not telling the truth. That was a lie. You really need to hear that to know. If you know that person intimately enough, then you already know. And so, again, I think it goes back to your point. You have to do the work. And whether the person is supposed to be, quote unquote, the one, or the one you've chosen, and the one who's chosen you, if you're in that commitment, there's work that has to be done. And so it's as simple as, you're not going to like each other every moment of the day. You're not supposed to agree on everything, because you're two totally different people coming into a communal space that you're going to have to, kind of push, pull, give in, and so, you have people that literally say, do you want to fight? Or do you want to be happy? Do you want to be right? Or do you want to be happy? And so the longer people are married, they get to a point where it's like, I just want peace and quiet and calm in the house. That's more important than anything at this point. And so that's probably the secret to longevity. You go in your corner, I go in mine. Everything is good. We know we love each other. We know no one's going anywhere. But part of the work sometimes is being selfless and just literally saying, yeah, it doesn't even matter. Just,
Yes. Because I think a lot of people, when you're working at your relationship, a lot of people's like, oh, I worked up a relationship, I got the person. And it's like, it's like forever, ever. Okay, don't try to sue us for me doing that one. Okay, that was like, I don't think
work is forever.
I don't think they have rights to that or anything, but
the work is just beginning.
It's just beginning. And it's the fact that you have to recall that every day you are creating new experiences for yourself. And those experiences are experienced by you outside of your significant other. So you constantly have to learn the person, because it's your experiences that actually make you and actually help shape your thought process. So my thought process when I was in my early 20s is totally different than my thought process now. And it's because experiences. And so I'm constantly evolving as a person. So therefore, my mate has to constantly evolve with me and learn me, because every time I step out of the house, every time I experience something new, it's like, you know what? That makes me think of this particular point, a stance I had, and it's having me rethink this. I might, concede to some more things. I might change my viewpoint. It might make me take a harder stance than what I originally had. So it's like people are always, it's like, no, y'all gotta keep working at it. And it's like when you look at Hannah and Mark, it's like they had that. They always were. It seemed like they were always working on their relationship because they were always talking. Well, he would talk with her. She seemed like she was a more talkative one, but he would talk and he would participate, and they would constantly talk and talk and talk. And I think I'm trying to not give too many spoilers. And I think in the show, when he goes to her because a major life event happened, it has a testament to say, well, wait a second, you've already met your one. You know who she is. You got her phone number. You know where she lives. She know where you live. So if she was such the one, you would have more of a draw to share that momentous event with her versus your wife, Hannah. But you went to Hannah. You were like, I couldn't think of anybody else that I want to share this news with. And it's like,
well,
if you so much of the one, why didn't you go to your
one? Because again, I think that makes the point. You know, the one is a TV show.
Yes.
And the reality of it is you cannot base, you know, how you live your life and who you meet and who your one is. And, you know, I'm of the belief that, you know, I used to say as a young girl, I'll probably have 5 or 6 husbands before it's all said and done, just because I changed my mind so quick. But, you know, right, that's not what I would think now. But, you know, it's just the reality of a thing where you start to understand as you change, like you said, as you change and you evolve, that person's supposed to change and evolve alongside you. That means there's work to be done. And so if you're not a committed type of person in the first place, someone saying this is your one is not going to make you stick with that person like that. It's going to cause you to have a certain level of trauma and turmoil about, I really don't like this person, or I don't want to be here. But I feel like now that I've been told scientifically and genetically and, you know, through all the hypotheses and that this is where I'm supposed to be, that I'm committed. I have to stay here in this particular space. And I think that this,
and I think that's one of the dichotomies that the show actually does a good job of actually highlighting, but they do it very subtly. In Rebecca's, I don't know if it's her personal assistant, but the person is also on the board with her. So spoiler alert, because I have to say this. So the personal assistant, the woman who's with her, she has a husband. She's not going to leave the husband. She's been matched. She found the one. She has been intimate with the one. And Rebecca's like, well, you have the one. Why don't you be the one? She says, I like being with many people. I just have a high sex drive, and I just like to sit up here and be with people. But I love my husband because he understands and he knows me. I'm more comfortable with him. We have more likes and things in common. So I'm going to stay with him. But I'm still going to sit up here and do everything else. No, I have no plans. She's like, I have no plans whatsoever to be with the one, or the one that you say is the one. And that has a big testament. She's like, okay, he was nice. We got it on. It was good, but that's about all he's good for.
Exactly.
It was like, wow. And they just skimmed over it because it was like, that was the only time they mentioned it. It was like, no,
go back to that.
Go back.
Exactly.
And you know, you need to expound and stretch that out, because that has a lot to do with people. It's like, okay, we have fun together. Nice.
Right.
Like I know. Leave your money on the nightstand and get out.
Well, you know, Sophia, I think it would be interesting to kind of, if I had it in me to check with some of these real life DNA matchmakers. I don't want to talk to them. I want to talk to their clients. And I want to see, because some of them have been around since as early as 2008. All right. So by now they should have a track record that shows you, bam, we got this in hand. All right.
Okay.
I would love to see some of the folks who may have met through these sites, and then find out, you know, is it possible? Did you, you know, fall in love with the person? Did it work? How was this, you know, how was it going at this point? Would you say that it's truthful, or do you feel like you've been led into something that you feel, you know, obligated to stay in now because you've been told that this is where you're supposed to be?
Exactly.
I mean, if you could be honest
I think
about
they
that
should get their money back, though. I mean, for some of these companies, once you start adding, you know, personalities, tell me what you like. This ain't that none of that got to do with DNA.
DNA, yeah.
So you need to give me my money back, because you say that you can provide me DNA romance, but you're asking me all these other questions that ain't got nothing to do with my DNA. So I need some money back.
So basically, eugenically speaking, you can go back to the old, again, the American Breeders Association, and just say, let's measure your lips and your nose and see how
go back to the original test. You can give women a whole bunch of different men's sweaty shirts. Men get a whole bunch of women's sweaty bras, or whatever article clothing you want to exchange. And basically what they're saying is, whose musty order does not putrefy you enough to where you like, you know what, I need for you to go take a shower. Not now, but right now. That's all they say. Who smell?
You don't smell as bad as the other ones, so I think I'll go with you.
Yes.
My one. Woo! Okay.
Okay, so if you want to do that, that will save you $250. The cheapest company I saw was the Switzerland company, and they were charging $100. So
wow, yeah, I think someone had a $99 sale.
Yeah, but they were only doing DNA. So it's like, if y'all want to skip all that, just go find a couple random people, just be like, join a gym and just go down there and just be start sniffing people.
This. We're still under COVID, y'all. Find something to do where you can get together online with people. There are a number of art galleries that are doing, Zoom, exhibitions and whatever. And people are still trying to hook up through that. So they get to see each other and get to know each other. And so, see if, if you can find a way of getting to know people in a different way. And again, I understand loneliness is at an all-time high. We talked a lot about the fact that, folks are buying pets at record number because they just don't want to be alone right now. And I get it. I think quarantine has made it far worse than it already was. And then there's just this thing about, I think we still have young people who believe if I don't meet someone and get married by a certain point, whatever that point is. And you remember being in Lincoln, Sophia, you can't even heckle because you're right here looking at me. So, but the rule of thumb, a lot of times, it's my understanding, and what I was told was that a lot of times the girls in Lincoln, Nebraska would get engaged as juniors in high school. They would be married right after senior prom, and they were building households while their husbands either went to college or started work, and they would really be 18, 19, 20 years old. And so it was almost like social ritual. If you weren't getting married the summer after you graduated from high school, you felt like, time, by the time you're about to graduate from college, if you haven't found someone, then you're thinking that you're an old maid. And, Sophia and I are looking around like, are you crazy? These are the best years of your life. You better go travel, go find something to do, figure out who you are and all of this. And so,
figure out who you are, because you really don't know who you are. Because, young people, if you're watching this, after you graduate high school and you get to live on your own, whether or not you're in college or whatever you're doing, please understand your parents' rules are not going to be your rules. So you were forced to live a certain way for all these years. Yes, parents, I'm so sorry I have said this. Yes, you have been forced to live a certain way. And now you can say, you know what? I don't like doing dishes this way. I don't care if dishes sit in the sink for 2 days. It doesn't bother me. I don't care if clothes look like this, if the places look like, if this couch is at a 45-degree angle, I want it at a 62. Like, your parents, you have to do what your parents say you have to do because you're under their rule. But once you get under your rule, then you really learn, I can deal with this, I can't deal with this. So when you jump from your parents' house to another house, now the thing is that you're just going to adapt. Mm-hmm. And you're going to just follow whatever it is that their nuances are. They don't like it like this. They don't like this. And you're just going to adapt because you have not figured out yourself. And then when you get older, that's why you have such a high rate of divorce among older couples, because usually they got married really, really young. They don't know anything about themselves. And the wife is just like, I really don't like this. The only reason I stay with you is because we had kids. Now they're gone. I'm learning more about myself. And I'm like, I really can't stand this. This really gets on my nerves.
And the world is changing. And the world is absolutely changing, Sophia. So again, where years ago it was okay. I mean, and it's still okay now. This is what you want. All right. But literally it becomes, up until the 1970s, a woman couldn't do anything on her own. You couldn't sign for a lease of an apartment. You couldn't get a car. You couldn't have a bank account. Credit card, you can have anything unless a male, it could be your son, it could be your nephew, it could be someone younger than you. But some male had to vouch for your credibility because women didn't have the brain power. Imagine that. They didn't have the brain power or the common sense to manage households and finances and things like that. So we're eugenically told. So based on this, the world has changed considerably since then. And now you literally have folks who, again, have been in marriages for 20, 25, 30 years. And it's like, I have a say in how things are run outside of this house, I can determine that I'm not going to cook dinner, but I'm actually going to order in, or I don't have to do things this way. I don't, and so it's a liberation that starts in your mind first, and it actually is a rebellion to some extent because everything you've been taught is centered around that. So again, when we talk about the one, the thing that just kept getting me is the idea that there's one person in fairy tales that always is some man that's out there again with the slipper and does your foot fit this slipper? Is someone coming to take you out of things and bring you into something else, but it's a rescuing type of thing, taking you out of drudgery and you're making you whole. And the idea of making you whole makes you believe that the one person that you are, all right, or the one person that you come across just by happenstance and you really like is not enough. The science has to get involved and say, nah, we figured out a way that genetically will keep this person from ever leaving you, from ever cheating on you, from ever any of these other things. And so you kind of buy into it. And so, like I said, we just want to make sure, check out the show. Sophia, we've actually done a whole hour, so I don't want you to ever talk about the fact that I'm getting on Coronation Street, folks, and staying on for 2 and 3 hours. We actually did a whole hour. So we're gonna close this out. The show is again on Netflix and it's called The One. If you have questions, hit the Acumen Facebook page up or send me an email. Is Acumen Magazine 365 at gmail.com. Outside of that, before we drop off of here, I'm going to take the last few minutes. Monday, we lost actor Yaphet Kotto. And for those of you who've been in Acumen classes before, you understand that he is one of my all-time favorite subject matters. My eugenics study buddy, he's everything when we start talking about Black masculinity. And I always say, this is a real big, tall, Black, assuming type of presence. And I had the absolute privilege of meeting Mr. Kotto years ago, 1998, December of 1998, on the set of Homicide. And I wasn't there to see him, but when he walked around the corner, I was interviewing another actor on the show, but when he walked around the corner, I literally just kind of stopped and I'm looking like, God, dog, this man is tall. And like, he immediately, looked at me and he's like, you here to see me, young lady? And I was like, no, but I think I ought to.
He was the one. He was the one.
Right. So it's like, wow, okay. So, for years, I've had students and friends to try and check out his films, specifically The Liberation of L.B. Jones. Take a look at that. I know everybody loves 007, Live and Let Die. But my favorite of all time, because I'm a bit of a kook, he did.
I know that it was so tragic. I was just like, I wasn't expecting to see that when I saw that.
Right. It's just like we've been watching Midnight Run for the last 2 days and just on the floor laughing. One, when you pair Yaphet Kotto with Charles Grodin and Robert De Niro, and you add the type of comedic timing in the middle of all this action, the comedy, and it was brilliant. And so half of the little, funny side comments that we're making in my household and in the office, a lot of them deal with that movie Midnight Run. So check it out. God bless his family. I pray to God he's made a wholesome transition. And so with that, Dr. Sophia Sparks, thank you as always. It's always fun and a pleasure to be on with you. We're going to sit this video over there on the Acumen page on Facebook so you guys can check it out. We may also load it over to YouTube. We realize it's the middle of the day and we ain't worried about this. Me and Sophia just over here talking to ourselves. We're good, okay, because we do this anyway. Thank you so much for joining me, Sophia. Please give my best to Cliff and Maraway. All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
And hopefully we'll do this again real soon.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Yes.
All right, guys. We are eugenically speaking, and we're closing this out. We want armchair historians all over the place. Live a little bit, read a little bit, grow a whole lot. All right.
There you go.
Thank you. Bye.